My name is Average Joe, and I'm a proud geek with expertise in movies, superheroes, and animation.
My name is Beef Pork Ribs. I'm a fine repository of esoteric knowledge, which I suppose most people would qualify as geeky. Though I dabble in many fandoms, my main areas of expertise are anime, movies, and Belgian comics, with a strong recent insurgency of D&D.
Our mission is to bring nerd and geek culture to the masses
by sticking it all under the microscope.
Welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast.
Movies, comics, graphic novels, TV, cartoons, animation, nerds are geeks, entertainment culture. Hear it on the Bat Jar, Nerdy Power. Nerds and geeks, come gather around the scene. Come and join us in the Bat Jar. Come and tune into Average Joe and his team. Lots of room here in the Bat Jar. When the newest nerdy news drops, these podcast pals put it under the scope. DC, Marvel, Disney, Star Wars, cinematic, multiverse. It's mega Christmas, strangest franchise. Hear it on the Bat Jar, Nerdy Power.
Hello there, and welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast, where we put nerd and geek culture under the microscope.
And nothing is beyond our grasp. Even things that came out before the podcast was the towering dominance of the geek and nerd culture world that it is today. We will go back in time and pick it apart or talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the vote of confidence. It is kind of wild. The show's been going on for almost 6 years now, and so there are a few subjects that haven't ever been addressed, at least in some way. Like even today, talking about The Force Awakens, we've definitely spoken about it in relation to its sequels, but never as a whole conversation itself. But before we get to that, there's one piece of news that I learned this week that I want to get your opinion on, Beeper. I think it was just a day or two ago, Sony Pictures announced that Labor Day weekend, they're going to be releasing an extended cut of Spider-Man No Way Home in theaters. And they're calling it the Spider-Man No Way Home, the More Fun Stuff edition.
Wow, they went really professional with the with their marketing. I mean, sure. I don't see. I was really excited after No Way Home, and I will likely rewatch it at some point in my life. But I don't know if I'd go out of my way to watch a special edition of it just because it came out. I feel like it'll fall in the same way that the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans are, where it's I'll have it on my shelf, and every once in a while I'll watch it, but not necessarily go out of my way to try to make it part of my day, or make a big event out of watching just because they've got an extended edition.
We'll see. As information about the physical Blu-ray release was coming out, it was announced that there was going to be 20 minutes of deleted scenes. And the rumor was that a lot of them included more footage of all three Spider-Man together. And then also I think there was another scene that Matt Murdock was in. So people were getting excited about getting the Blu-ray because they're like, oh wow, yeah, more scenes of them all together. And then when the Blu-ray did get released, there were no deleted scenes.
Oh, that's a really not good thing to do. I don't know. I feel like that's a really, kind of kicking yourself in the foot at that point. Kicking yourself in the foot, shooting yourself in the foot to be like, no, we have bonus features. We're just not giving them to you.
Well, there were bonus features on the Blu-ray, but behind the scenes featurettes and stuff, but they did not include these deleted scenes.
Yeah.
And that's why I didn't buy, I have not gotten the Blu-ray yet. Cause I'm like, well, if I'm going to buy this thing, I want to have all that extra content.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Cause that is not all, but most of what people want out of a Blu-ray is the, more bonus features, better bonus features. I feel like it is kind of bad marketing to ignore that. as it were.
Now, I do remember they did something like this when Far From Home was released in 2019. They did a re-release around Labor Day weekend, and it had like extended footage or whatever. And it was that, as far as I can recall, it was an attempt by Sony to try and like up the box office total for the movie. And I remember like protesting on the podcast that decision. I said, "Don't go see it," because at that point Sony and Marvel had kind of like broken up. They weren't going to make any more movies together. And I was like, "We got to send a message, tell them that they can't not work with Marvel Studios."
Right. I don't know. I feel like it's just that it does feel like that's what they're doing again. They're just trying to inflate the box office weirdly because like it's very successful. Like right, I'm not going. Yeah, it's a very successful movie, and the box office did very well. So I don't know why they'd feel a need to try to inflate that even more.
Because they want to get into that $2 billion club. There's only a handful of movies that have ever grossed over $2 billion.
Oh, I see.
It's at like 1.89 billion right now.
Well, that makes sense then, somewhat. I still don't agree with it or condone it, but at least it makes a little bit more sense than just being like, oh yeah, we're just trying to pump the box office a little bit. But I still feel like, they still beat a record with the movie. It seems a little weird that they'd kind of double down on that and be like, okay, now we need to like go even further beyond Super Saiyan,
But you know what? They've got my attention. Like I want to see more footage of those guys all interacting with each other. So if this is the only way it's going to be possible is to go see it in a theater, then they've got my money.
I see. You, like Fry, have told them to shut up and simply take the win.
Yeah, but I'm hopeful that if I give them the money to go see in the theater, I'm hoping they'll do like a special edition home video release that will include all these, in either this extended, more fun stuff edition of the movie or like a more complete Blu-ray release with all the deleted scenes.
I see. So the average Joe of the past is not the average Joe of today. You've gone to the dark side of no, they can do what they want as long as I get more Spider-Man.
Well, it's different now. Like back in 2019, I was protesting the re-release because they had broken up with Marvel and they were committed to continue making Spider-Man movies without Disney's involvement. But now it seems like they're at least for the Spider-Man mainline movies, they're going to keep working with Marvel. So I'm willing
Right.
to give them more of my money.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I can.
But
Yeah.
admittedly, I'm also worried because the movie was already 2.5 hours long, and adding in 20 minutes means it's going to be almost 3 hours. And I don't know how much your experience with this is like, but I find most extended editions of movies, by and large, it's usually like, yep, like that scene could have been shorter. Like they were right to cut the movie down. Like I think probably I guess Lord of the Rings is probably the only example of where a movie's really benefited from having all the scenes be longer or extra scenes in.
But that's also like the only one I can think of. That
You never
like the
watched
only
like a
movie.
director's cut of a movie that's longer?
Oh, I'm sure I have, but like not one that was very specifically made to be that. If that makes sense.
Right.
Like I think technically I have the director's cut of Daredevil, but that was kind of like the other one did so poorly that you kind of had to get it.
They did something like this for Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2. They released a DVD called Spider-Man 2.1, and it basically is an extended cut of the movie where, yeah, there's extra scenes. Some scenes are longer. There's like a scene where Jameson puts on the Spider-Man costume after he gets from Trash Man, and
Okay.
I don't think it's any better than the original. I think it's like some of the extended scenes. You're like, yeah, like they were right to cut it down shorter.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's the thing. I feel like if the movie already works, then why, I don't know, why push yourself further than that?
But regardless, Labor Day weekend 2022, this special, more fun stuff edition of Spider-Man No Way Home is going to be in theaters, and I'm certainly incentivized to go see it. I don't know how long it's going to be in theaters for, probably only for a few weeks. So, yeah, mark your calendars, folks. If you want to see more of the three Spider-Men interacting with each other, put it down, because I don't know how long it'll be there for.
Or catch it on YouTube eventually.
Oh.
No, I'm kidding. Don't do that, people. Support the official release.
Speaking of supporting the official release, did you see that Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged put out a new episode for the first time in forever?
No, but I'm not sure how much of my interest that is going to take. I still enjoy Little Karibo as a creator, but I'm much further away from the time I enjoyed Yu-Gi-Oh than when the series started,
Fair enough.
and I feel like abridging is kind of dead at this point. There are
Speaking
very
of
few
things that might
actives.
be dead,
Star Wars,
let's talk about Star Wars.
the franchise as a whole, or are you
No,
are you
I
part of
don't.
those
I don't.
cynics who are like they're churning out so much stuff, the quality is going to take a nosedive, and nobody's going to watch any of it?
No, I'm definitely not.
Okay. I've definitely seen an increasing number of people in that camp, though, like almost alarmingly so.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens today. This movie was released in December of 2015.
I went to see it in
Featured-
theaters.
I went to theaters as well. Do you recall how this movie came about?
George Lucas sold Star Wars to Disney, and they made a movie.
That's right. In 2012, George Lucas sold Lucasfilm, his production company, to Walt Disney Corporation for $4 billion,
Money well spent.
which is very poetic in a sense because George Lucas founded Lucasfilm in like 1974, 1975, because no major Hollywood studio would finance Star Wars. He like took the script around to different studios and nobody thought it would be a good idea. But he believed in the idea, and so he like took out a bank loan and financed the creation of his own production company. And then Star Wars went on to become one of the most successful movies of all time. So to George Lucas, I say kudos to you. You put yourself out there, and you ended up, reaping the rewards.
Yeah, I'm guessing. I don't know. Did you do enough research to figure out what the return on investment was for him creating it? I'd be interested in that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you think of the amount of money the Star Wars movies have made since he sold it, and how much of that would have gone back to him, I'm sure someone's done that calculation.
Oh, I was thinking more like how much his loan was to make the company, and then how much he ended up selling it for.
Oh, I'm sure he's definitely made his money back.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, I was more thinking about the percentage to which he did.
Well, shortly after the announcement that Lucasfilm was being purchased by Disney was made, they were pretty quick to announce that there was going to be a new Star Wars trilogy of films that were going to start in 2015, and it was going to bring back the original three stars: Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, and Carrie Fisher.
More or less.
Now, do you remember? I remember being excited about this back in like 2012 when this was being announced. Were you into Star Wars at that point? Were you following this at all?
So my family was never really big into Star Wars. Like, we watched all the prequels in theater because, why wouldn't we? And they were aimed at kids anyways, so, that was a thing that we did. But beyond that, like, I wasn't a huge fan. Like, of what? Of the...
They announced this trilogy. They were bringing back the original cast.
Oh no, I was not aware of any of that. Like I knew there was a new Star Wars movie. I knew Lucasfilm had been purchased, but beyond that, there wasn't really anything that I knew.
Yeah, I like to think I'm a Star Wars fan, but there's tons of lore that I've never invested in, so I'm definitely more of a casual fan. I was paying attention enough to know that they were making the series, and almost immediately after announcing they were making the trilogy, they also made a point of announcing that they weren't going to be following the storyline of the expanded universe, that they were now converting all of those stories that were set in the Star Wars world post Return of the Jedi as they made the big shift from calling it the expanded universe to Legends.
Yeah, I remember that, and the massive backlash that they got for it, because that got a lot of people and a lot of people I knew very upset. Because, well, I mean, to some degree, I understand it because a lot of people had invested in the extended universe like quite a bit, and so suddenly saying, all of these books you've read, all of these series you've enjoyed are no longer part of the canon. It's a tough sell to make, and it was a gutsy move, especially I think especially now in retrospect, like looking back, being like, I'm not sure why they did that because really, what was the like? It didn't really help them that much, and they aren't setting up that they didn't set up that many new canons, right?
I think they
And
just wanted
in
the
fact,
freedom to write their story for this new trilogy
oh
without
no, I
having
I
to.
understand that, but what I'm saying is, like at the time, it made more sense, but looking at it now, it kind of backfired pretty massively on them. And you look at almost all the Star Wars project, the tons of Star Wars project that are in development right now, and like almost all of them are based on things that were more related to the EU, right? Like it's more Boba Fett, more Rebels, more Bad Batch isn't quite that, but like they seem to be going really heavily into that now, and it seems a little strange that this new Star Wars or the Disney Star Wars started with kind of deciding that you didn't want to have those things going.
Yeah, and when they made that announcement, it didn't bother me because I had only really read a handful of Star Wars books, and I knew some of the details of the post Return of the Jedi story because I had like these reference books for Star Wars that kind of explained like who Han and Leia's children were and who Luke's wife was. It's like I knew who these characters were, but I didn't know, like I didn't care, I guess, enough about those stories to hear. Oh, like they're not going to adapt this; they're just going to do something different.
Yeah, that's very much how I felt at the time. I knew a lot of people who were really annoyed, but I myself was just like, oh, okay.
Now, when they started production, J. Abrams, who was chosen to direct this new Star Wars, he like filmed a video of himself on the set, and very prominently next to him, I remember there being like a creature that was like a practical effect. Like it was like a kind of like a person in like a costume with like this turtle head that moved back and forth. And I think he was trying to communicate the message that, we know that people didn't like the prequels because everything was CG. And with these new movies, we're gonna go back to using practical effects as much as possible. And I think that was some attempt to try and, I guess, bring comfort to fans of the original trilogy who did not enjoy the prequels to say like these new films are gonna be more like the Star Wars that you love and not the Star Wars you don't love.
I was not aware of that one. But the thing, I do understand it, but at the same time, I don't think. Hmm. I think that is a gross misunderstanding of what the problems with the sequels, the prequel trilogy is, or were. But also, more so than that, it's just kind of, I don't know. it's kind of like trying to pander to the older audience kind of alienates part, like the people who did grow up with the prequel and enjoyed it, just saying like, oh no, this was bad and we're doing something different, especially considering they did do something different from both and nobody liked it. So I don't know if practical effects were not the problem,
Well, I'm
but
not.
I guess they
They
went
didn't.
for it.
They didn't say that, right? I'm inferring.
I suppose.
Like the fact that out of this animatronic creature effect was so prominently featured in the set video. Just trying to say, like, yeah, and I don't. Yeah, you're right. Like the problems with the prequels don't lie exclusively with the fact that everything was CGI and that there was green screens everywhere and they were never. Yeah, that's part of the problem. It's not the whole problem.
Well, I mean, it's not even that big a part of the problem either when you get down to it, because
You don't
like
think so? Because I've heard the actors like really complain about, oh, like it was so hard to act like when you didn't know what you were looking at or where you were.
yeah, but like I think what people dislike wasn't just the wanton use of it, or was the wanton use of it, not just the existence of it. Like I don't know how to explain it, but like it wasn't just that there were a lot less physical effects. It was that the quality of the special effects also left to be desired. And I think that's kind of the problem with like trying to put that message out there, is like, oh yeah, we're doing it right this time. And it's like, okay, but CGI has gone a long way and people have gotten a lot better at making it not look terrible. So why would you bank so much on that?
Yeah. Anyway,
And
all I have
honestly,
to say,
yeah, I think it's very telling that, I know this is my opinion, but I know a fair amount of people who have also agreed with it, that like the new Star Wars has made them miss or have a new appreciation for the prequel trilogy.
before we just dive into this movie itself, I just want to say, in light of watching the Obi-Wan Kenobi series on Disney Plus and seeing how it's getting raked over the coals for like things that are not in line with the existing canon, I can totally understand how they would want to just kind of like have an open sandbox for them to play with instead of being like, okay, we have to do this or that, or we have to like explain why this person's here or that person's not here. You know, we'll talk more about like what that actually ends up doing to the overall canon, but Beeper, give us what you would think is the Blu-ray case description for Star Wars: The Force Awakens.
Who are you?
I'm no one.
Follow me.
Nothing will stand in our way. I'll show them the dark side.
I don't know your name.
Finn, what's yours?
I'm Ray.
You might need this.
Star Wars: The Force Awakens.
Ah, man, I have to remember what happened in that movie. In the galaxy is more or less at peace, but remnants of what used to be the Empire are causing problems, and they're building the Death Star 2.0. But this time it's a whole planet instead of being a moon. A unlikely hero from a desert planet, once again, Dune's influence is there, decides to take up arms and take up the legacy of Luke Skywalker, but with Han Solo, in order to defeat this new threat. Also, there's a guy with a crossguard in his lightsaber, and that's the dumbest thing that's ever been invented.
Oh man. Okay. So
Look, I think it's legitimate. People should still be upset about that.
so I I watched this movie when it came out in theaters back in 2015, and before this week, I had not rewatched it in its entirety since.
I was going to do that, but then I didn't because I didn't have time, really.
Yeah,
How does it
Tater
hold
Tot
up?
and we squeezed it in. We watched the whole thing. We ended up doing it in 2 parts, but it's an enjoyable movie. I was able to sit down and enjoy it. And I think because my expectations are set, like it's like knowing the things that don't pay off. It's like okay, well I can imagine like this is a world like it's an alternate reality where oh maybe there's a sequel to this movie where mysteries that are introduced get solved and it doesn't bother me as much anymore.
But you know better.
But honestly, like in and of itself, it's it feels like a Star Wars movie, and I think the way it's done, you don't think about as much of the inconsistencies. Like I saw Top Gun Maverick last week, and it's a well put together movie. There are plot holes for sure, but the way the movie is put together, you don't think about those very much. It's just
Right.
actually like a created film, and I think I want to kind of give Force Awakens that same credit. It I know people complain about it because it essentially is a rip off of A New Hope, but
I never bought that completely. Like, I
well,
understand where that
I don't.
criticism comes from, but I also kind of, yeah, I don't know. I
There's
wasn't crazy about it.
similarities, but it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't feel at all like a complete knockoff to me.
Yeah.
And history repeats itself. Like that's a and I know at one point I was like, really, like it's been only like 30 years, and the Empire, like there's already like another empire ready to try and take over the Republic. And Tater Tot said, "Well, World War One, World War Two."
Yeah. And, but for very different reasons.
Well, yes, but the point is that you can have multiple conflicts within a shorter period of time.
Yeah, for sure. And I think they were for, yeah, very different things too. Um, but yeah, I do actually distinctly remember um, coming out of the theaters after watching the movie, and my brother-in-law saying, "Well, it was a Star Wars movie." So like, I think there is something to that. I haven't rewatched it, but I feel like yeah, there probably is something to the whole like, if you went back to this movie, it probably works a lot better than you'd expect it or would remember it.
And who knows? There might be just like an overwhelming wave of nostalgia. Like you just hear John Williams music, you hear the sound effects of like how the spaceships work, or the sounds of the lightsabers, or Chewbacca.
That is also entirely possible, but I don't think
And
it's that crazy.
I think it's got similar vibes to A New Hope, certainly, especially towards the end. Perhaps subconsciously, my enjoyment of the original Star Wars kind of like took over my brain.
That's also possible.
One thing I do think is very different is the style of humor. Like it's one of the very first scenes. Poe Dameron comes face to face with Kylo Ren, and then there's this kind of like witty dialogue where he's like, "What do we do? Like, do you talk first? Do I talk first? Like, I can't read anything from the mask."
Yeah, that was that I remember being a little jarring. Like
It's
like
jarring in that
overall,
like that kind of humor it wasn't in a lot of the other Star Wars movies. I thought it was funny. Like I was like that made me laugh.
really, that was I think one of the only times in the movie where I was like, oh look, it's the Disney slash Marvel sense of humor, and like it wasn't bad, but also the problem with hmm, Star Wars is campy. Like it is, right? There's no way around it. It's a space opera, right? the
Yeah,
part of
no debate
works
here.
well. Yeah, part of what makes campy things work well is that they take themselves seriously within themselves, right? Like, and that kind of broke it in a sense.
Okay, yeah,
It
I see what you're
was
saying.
like the quippy sense of humor is good and has its place, but I feel like in an epic, it doesn't really work. Like, there are ways to make it work, and the ways to make it work, I can't analyze it, but it's what they made Gimli do in Lord of the Rings. That's how it works. Because
Now,
no, but and even there sometimes he's a little bit much, but like, it's to have one character who has some quips but who otherwise is serious, which Poe really wasn't. Poe was kind of a goof the whole way through, somewhat. I mean, I might be misremembering some of it, but like, it just, yeah, I feel like that was a little strange. And it also, the other problem I had with that, and a few other scenes, is that it just really undercut Kylo Ren as a villain.
yeah, I
And
mean,
especially,
I thought
if,
his temper tantrums where he basically like breaks stuff with his lightsaber, like I thought that was funny.
yes, that scene could have worked in a different way if instead, like, I feel like if instead of getting angry and slashing things with his lightsaber, he just got angry and things started like breaking around him, like similar to what Darth Vader does, like in
Empire,
no, not in Empire, in the third,
Revenge of the Sith.
yeah, in Revenge of the Sith, like after they tell him that Padme is dead, and he's just like, no, like, okay, the no is a little ridiculous, but things just start breaking because he's emanating force.
Mm-hmm.
That would have worked a lot better.
Yeah, but so in your opinion, those kind of like, let's say like a different kind, the Marvel humor takes you out of the experience.
Yeah, I feel like it didn't really work super well for her. Yeah, specifically for Star Wars and the Star Wars universe. And I know it was a different, universe and the extended universe, but it was still the same universe as all the other movies. And, you know, whatever your opinions are of the prequel movies, they still very much felt like the same universe.
Yeah, I think I did. I think because at that point I was already used to Marvel movies and it didn't feel like that was nonstop. Like there's Marvel movies like Guardians of the Galaxy 2 that it bothers me how often the humor comes in to interrupt dramatic moments. But it's sparsely in this one enough that it didn't bother.
Yeah, I I can understand that. I don't know. To me, that was one of the few moments I actively remember disliking in the movie, especially because it was so early and it really was like, and it did completely set the tone for the movie, which I enjoyed. And even like within the movie, if a different character had done that, it would have worked a lot better, I think. Like, make Harrison Ford do that. He's a confused old man in real life, in the movie. Like, it would have worked perfectly well if he would have done that, especially because it'd be him sassing his son. That would have been great, and I think that would have worked. It might have been slightly undercutting the most dramatic scene in the movie, but I would have preferred that to what we got.
So this is my big theory about The Force Awakens is that, through the three new main characters, they were trying to establish a new trio, a new like Han, Luke, Leia dynamic. And the way that we're introduced to the characters is they kind of like they they pull a twist on us because when
Wait,
we
do you mean
meet
Ray Poe and the other one?
Finn, Finn,
Finn? Okay. Yeah.
yeah. So when the movie, like as the movie was marketed and as the movie goes on, they focus on these three new characters, and you get the sense that like they're going to be kind of serving similar roles in these new movies as the original trio did in the original movies. Initially, it seems like Poe Dameron is like Han Solo, kind of like a pilot who's a little cocky and, you know, he's there. And then you have Rey, who seems to be the Han Solo of the group because she's the one who has all the mechanical skills and is a really good pilot. And then you have Finn, who seems to, he gets the lightsaber and you think that he's going to be the one going down the path of the Jedi. But then, by the
Interesting.
end of the movie, they kind of, and then as you go into the sequels, it's like the roles all kind of switch. It ends up being more so that Poe is
Rey
more like
is all three of
Leia,
them.
and
Oh, okay.
or is Poe like Han, and then Finn is like Leia.
I kind of. The thing is, like, and this is, a gripe I have with all of the, sequel trilogy, I guess it is, but, like, is that they set up a whole lot of things that, not just that didn't pay off, like, that's obvious that there were things that didn't pay off, but the movie is constantly going in a direction that seems like it is going to pay homage or work with what had previously existed, and then they don't.
Can you give an example what you're talking about?
The whole the way that Rey and Ben, because Kylo seem to be going one towards like towards the way of the Jedis, and that's Kylo. Like in the second movie, Kylo starts getting rid of his attachments. He's still angry, but not like he's still upset, but he's not really that angry. He's actually starts to act a lot more rationally in that movie than he did beforehand. And he's already killed his father. His mother is dead. He's kind of like going in this way that actually would allow him to be a lot more calm and collected. And Rey is doing the exact opposite. She's letting her feelings take over. She's like going crazy. She's doing all these things that a Jedi definitely should not do. And I understand that conception of the Jedi is very much prequels, and is something that Clone Wars and other things have worked to show. Oh yeah, maybe it wasn't the best attitude, but at that point, it was still the canon. And then, things like Finn getting the lightsaber, or maybe he's going to be the one who is, who becomes the main character. Maybe they won't just make it somebody who's anybody, but then it just changes, and you're like, oh no, it just amounts to nothing. I don't know. I feel like they're like, and part of it is the lack of payoff from this movie, and then the fact that there was a different director for the second one. They went back to the same director for the third, and there's no real cohesion between the three. So maybe it is a lot of that, but I think
they did originally have a different director for all three movies. Then Colin Trevorrow, who was set to direct Episode 9, had a bad movie come out, and they kind of dropped him from it. And then The Last Jedi was received so poorly, they kind of backpedaled a bunch and brought back J.J. Abrams to finish it. But what you're talking about there is more so what's happening in The Last Jedi. So I don't think that's
true.
For trying to just talk about The Force Awakens as its own thing for a second, which of course is hard because it was the launch we had for the other movies.
But you're right. I think there's a good argument that The Force Awakens was actually a decent movie in of itself.
But you do make a point. Part of why I initially had such a strong negative reaction to The Last Jedi is because they introduced a lot of unsolved mysteries in this movie that end up being like not important at all in The Last Jedi or The Rise of Skywalker. And I'm like, okay, you're intentionally not telling us things because it's going to be revealed later. You can argue that isn't lazy storytelling, but then when you get to that point and it ends up being inconsequential, I think before on the podcast, I compared to like dangling keys in front of a child, like, ooh, like, you see this? Like, does this make you interested in our franchise? Well, Who's Snoke? Ooh, where did he come from? Doesn't matter. Who are Rey's parents? Doesn't matter. How did Maz Kanata get that lightsaber when it should be stuck at the bottom of like a Cloud City thing? Doesn't matter.
Yeah, a lot of, and again, that's where I think, even when judging this movie as its own entity, you shouldn't, because it was announced as part of a trilogy, right? Like, it was supposed to be something, like, it was already supposed to have a solution. And, based on not just like the next movie, but even based on like the same director taking over at the end of Rise of Skywalker, he could have offered some of those solutions, but he didn't. Like, he could have retconned things. He could have changed. Like, seriously, they retconned and changed so many things at that point in the series. Like, would it have really changed that much if he gave some answers to those questions? No. So, they just didn't really handle the trilogy as a trilogy, and it does start with this movie.
Yeah, but is it J.J. Abrams' fault that Ryan Johnson came in and basically like pulled a 180 on him with the one in the middle?
No, but again, he could have done the same or changed it himself as well. So I just, like, I think there is something to be said for he could have also not fixed it but changed it as well.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. Again, if you can somehow just sit down and watch this without knowing that there are sequels to it that are like, I think it's fair to say this is the best of the sequel trilogy.
I mean, even without having rewatched it, I can say that with pretty strong. I think without fear of being denied. No, not denied. Of being contradicted. That, yeah, it is.
And audiences would agree because it is to date still the highest grossing film domestically. It made like $936 million just in Canada and the US alone. No movie, even Endgame, wasn't able to come close to that. I think Endgame currently has like 856 million domestic, which means it's like almost $100 million less than The Force Awakens has, which tells me that, yeah, at that time in 2015, there was a lot of interest in a new Star Wars series.
Yeah, and like, I do remember people being super excited about it, being like, "Yes, new Star Wars movie." So, it's at the time it seemed exciting, and I think it's again, yeah, you can't be too negative on the movie itself, and if you watched it as a standalone, it would work decently. But it is also hard to do that, and I don't think it's honest to do that either, because, like, I don't know, I am of the opinion that J.J. Abrams didn't necessarily have the answer to all the mysteries either, and that you would have. I don't think it would have been as bad, but I still think that we would have had a kind of scenario where Revenge of the Sith was, where, like, you knew where the story was going to end because it had to end with New Hope. But when you left off at the end of Attack of the Clones, you're like, wow, they need to fit a lot into that last movie. And I feel like that's what would have happened. Even if J.J. Abrams would have kept going, the second movie would happen, and then they'd have to fix like all the plot, like get all of those questions answered really quickly in the third movie, and overcrowded it.
Now, when this was announced back in 2012, it made a point of saying that the original 3 stars were going to be part of the film. And I guess in my naivete, I sort of assumed that meant they were all going to have like lead roles. But of course, we know now that Han
You were
Solo's in the
wrong.
movie a lot. Yeah, Han Solo's in the movie a lot, but Leia's in it a little bit, and then poor Luke gets like 30 seconds of screen time, no dialogue.
Oh, and and a scene which Mark Hamill very openly was annoyed at for years afterwards.
Yeah, I think I remember him going. He was doing some like promotion for a charity with Kathleen Kennedy, the main like, president of Lucasfilm, and she like calls on him to say something, and he's just sort of staring at the camera, and he's like, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm used to just staring and not saying anything."
Yeah, and like, but even before that, he was like a lot of like yeah, a lot of people pointed out during the promotional materials, he was saying things like "you will not believe it" or like things like that, and he could not believe what they had done to his character. And I think that yeah, there was a lot of that, and it is pretty unbelievable what ended up happening. I think so. You know,
Now,
it's
Carrie Fisher had basically like moved away from acting, so I can understand why they might have wanted to use less of her, just because she maybe didn't want to be in the movie a whole lot.
she had a great cameo on 30 Rock.
Yeah, she had some good cameos and stuff, but I don't know. I'm like, I was like back me of 2012 was sold on the idea these three were going to be the main leads of the movie, and maybe that was I inferred something that wasn't actually promised. But in the end, it's like you got basically like feels like 1.6 of the three of them.
Yeah, and I think at that point more people were excited for um, Mark Hamill to be in it than Carrie Fisher, and possibly also than. Actually, I don't know. I feel like because that's the thing is that Harrison Ford was the one who had kept doing the most things, so I don't think people were as excited to see him because he'd been in other movies, whereas the other two, like, Mark Hamill didn't retire from acting, but he definitely changed what he was doing, right?
Oh
Like he
yeah,
started doing a
and
lot of different things.
and he'd put on a lot of weight. I remember there was a photo of him with like a Mickey Mouse Jedi, where it showed you, oh, like he's lost weight, he's gotten in a better shape to like come back to Star Wars, only to not really be in the movie.
Yeah, which I think also partially he didn't know to what like he probably put in a lot of that effort before he knew exactly what was happening, and that's kind of unfortunate too.
Yeah, and I think I could be wrong, but the sense I got from like the trilogy is that like 7 focuses on Han, 8 focuses on Luke, and I think 9 was meant to focus on Leia. But of
Right.
course, with Carrie Fisher's tragic passing away in 2016, it became impossible to have a movie where she was like the focal point because they had no more footage of her.
Yeah, and that's not anybody's fault, but it's one of the few things that wasn't anybody's fault, and there was nothing they could really do about it
No, definitely not.
except CGI her in again. But that I don't think anybody was gonna be okay with that after they did it the first time.
Yeah. Now, okay, talking about the new characters between Poe, Rey, and Finn. Would you say you recall like which one you enjoyed the most in that first film?
Hmm.
Because I'd forgotten like Poe Dameron isn't actually in The Force Awakens all that much. He's there in the very beginning, and then he's believed to be dead, and then he kind of shows up at the end for the fight.
Yeah, I think it was Finn because like I think for about half the movie it was Ray, and then the other half it was Finn.
Now, a lot of people at the time, and I think still now, cry that Rey is a Mary Sue because she seems to be just good at everything.
Yeah, I'm kind of in that camp, so
I,
like
I, I think there was a time when
well
I felt
again
like that.
I don't know if again I don't know if in this movie she's necessarily there. I think in the series as a whole I'm still definitely in that camp, but I'd have to rewatch the movie to see if it was really because I do remember like getting hyped about the idea of Finn facing off um against Kylo Ren, and then it was just like, oh no, she just stole his moment, and it was like, I don't know, man, it could have been good. It could have been good.
Well, I mean, it's only like it's the kind of thing you think about after the movie because in the moment it's like, oh, like she knows how to fix the ship, or oh, like she can somehow hold back the influence of Force from Kylo Ren. Oh, she can handle a lightsaber. And like, there are just people in the world who are really good at a lot of things. Like there's it didn't, to me at least, watching this film, it didn't feel like she was a Mary Sue, somebody who's just good at everything. It just, in that sense, and I'm like, yeah, she's just sort of comes across as somebody who's just naturally gifted.
Yeah, I can see that. Again, like I said, I'd have to rewatch it to really have an intelligent opinion on her in that movie, but I do think that on the whole, the series didn't really paint her in a super good light, or her character in that regards. Like, there were a lot of other incidents, and again, that aren't. Some of them are just kind of poor writing, and some of it were for the sake of having a twist. So it's like, it isn't necessarily inherently Rey, but definitely the script, and I think the pacing makes some of those more of an issue.
Yeah, I mean, like the moment when the Skywalker lightsaber comes out of the snow and it goes to her, like that. I remember being, oh, like that was a, I didn't see that coming. It was quite the surprise.
Yeah, but was it a welcome surprise?
Well, it certainly like played with my expectations because yeah, like on the poster for the movie, it's Finn holding a lightsaber. It certainly seemed as though it's like he's the reluctant hero in all this. Like he doesn't want to be involved, and he just kind of wants to run away. And then yeah, it seems like that's the moment where he's like, all right, I'm gonna fight against the bad guys, and then gets his butt whooped.
Yeah, I can see that.
Speaking of Finn, it's like this idea of a stormtrooper who defects from the bad side. Like, that's a cool idea, but I don't know. Watching the movie again, I'm like, it's not super clear as to why he doesn't want to be a stormtrooper anymore. Like you see that, a stormtrooper dies in his arms, and it's like it's almost as if like a switch flipped in his head, and he was all of a sudden he was like, okay, I gotta get out of here.
Yeah, I mean, and again, because he's one of the main characters, they could have established who that was and why he was important to him, and I think that would have worked fairly well. But they didn't really do that.
Yeah, and then I feel
like if that had been like his best friend or his brother or something like that, then you definitely get a lot more of what you want. But it wasn't really established, so I don't know.
yeah, and then this one, it really becomes clear he's got like this crush on Rey, which ends up not going anywhere for him.
Yep, and well, for anybody, like that one also, I just was weird because like it's not just that it went nowhere in the other movies; it went nowhere in that movie too.
Oh yeah, it was unrequited for sure.
Yeah, but and you know, whatever your opinion is on his relationship with Poe, they definitely had better chemistry than with Rey.
And I said we were going to come back to the extended universe stuff, but I can't understand. It's like, okay, I understand the idea of saying, okay, we're not going to follow the extended universe because we want to tell our own story. But Kylo Ren is basically the same thing as Jason Solo, a child of, because in the expanded universe, in the timeline that they set, Han and Leia have a couple kids who all become Jedi, and one of them named Jason ends up turning to the dark side. It's like if you're trying to be independent from the expanded universe, why would you choose to basically like tell the same story anyway?
Well, they had to. I don't know. Yeah, it is kind of strange. Oh, I just remembered the other thing. Sorry about the movies that didn't pay off the way that anybody expected. The Knights of Ren. They weren't the people from Rogue One, and that was just kind of weird. It was such a perfect setup. But
Also, this
yeah,
movie,
it is weird that they had something from the extended universe, they decided not to use it, and also like the like they see it does seem that the whole decision with the extended universe was very much trying to have their cake and eat it too, because they were trying to create a new canon but also trying to bring in people that were part of the old canon but like in a different way, and that makes it a lot more like an alternate universe rather than your own continuity, which also was kind of weird.
and also this movie confirms that Chewbacca does indeed have fingers. It freaked me out when I saw it this week too. When they're planting all the bombs, you clearly see he has like gorilla fingers that he like pushes buttons on. I always assumed he had like his hands were covered in fur, but
Or
nope,
that
he
he
has
had claws like a bear, because that would make sense.
no, but he's got gorilla fingers confirmed.
Was that the first time a Wookiee's hand was seen?
At least
Because
the
like
time that I
Wookiees
can
have been in a
remember.
lot of other things.
Well, I don't necessarily pay attention to every detail, but just
That's a
the
fair
way it's
point.
shot, where it zooms in on his, it doesn't zoom in, but the camera's like close up of his hand pressing a button on a bomb.
Oh, okay. I don't remember that at all, but I'll believe.
Well, I guess all I have to say as we kind of come around to our final thoughts here, you made a good point earlier that it's kind of hard to talk about this movie in and of itself without thinking of the movies that come after it, because it was meant to be part of a trilogy and it just was not a well executed trilogy. And I'd say this movie is more enjoyable if you can somehow like forget the fact that it had two sequels that came out afterward.
Yeah, but but like you said, it also still leaves you wanting for answers to those questions. But I think there were only two things that I actually disliked in this movie, and one of them wasn't that bad. Oh, sorry, three things. One of them wasn't that bad. The other one was the sense of humor thing, and the third one, of course, is Kylo Ren's lightsaber, and nothing will ever change that.
So since we never got to review the movie when it came out because we weren't around yet, I think I'm comfortable giving this one like a good old like maybe like a 3.2 out of 4 bat cookies.
Having not watched it, I will give it a 3.
So Star Wars: The Force Awakens is available on Disney Plus. If you have a streaming service, you can go watch it or buy the physical media. We have an email today from Eliza Jane Fillion. The subject line says Top Gun Maverick. And the email literally just says, "That is all I have to say," smiley face.
Ah, I see.
So I think
So
Eliza wants us to put Top Gun Maverick inside the batch jar.
I'm down for that. I have not seen it, but you have. We could even make it next week's episode, but throw it in the bat jar with the other
Yeah, we'll throw it in the
sequels.
Batch jar. Yeah, nostalgic sequels. And I will say, we'll talk about Top Gun Maverick eventually, but I will say for now, I really did enjoy it when I saw it. It was very well crafted film.
All right, I may have to watch Top Gun before watching that then.
If you want to reach the show, you can send us an email at
batjarpodcast@gmail.com.
or you can tweet us at
The Bat Cookie Jar.
You can find the Bat Jar Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, including YouTube, because we got a channel. Share our posts on Facebook, write reviews, give our shows a rating. This will help all people join us inside the Bat Jar, and we appreciate it dearly.
All right, it's time to go inside the bat jar. I think Obi-Wan Kenobi will have episode 5 this week, so there'll be at least one more week before we can talk about that.
I don't want to watch it.
What? Obi-Wan Kenobi is like my favorite Star Wars character.
Yeah, that's part of why I don't watch it.
Okay, here we go. Next week we're talking about the Winnie the Pooh franchise.
Oh, good God. Actually, that's okay. Okay. Franchise, we're talking movies, books, animated show, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, I think we're talking about
Live
the
action
whole.
movies, animated movies, book, and merchandise.
We're just not going to talk about the new horror movie that's coming out based on
Uh,
Winnie the Pooh.
Why? Because it hasn't come out yet, or because you don't want to?
Yeah, mainly because it hasn't come out yet. I mean, there's all we know about it is there's like a plot synopsis and like a photo.
All right, fair enough.
Winnie the Pooh became a public domain character this year, so now people can do whatever they want with the character.
Oh, that okay. I didn't realize that was why. That makes a lot of sense now.
So come back to the Bachelor podcast next week when we talk about Winnie the Pooh. And until that time, I'm Average Joe.
I'm Beef Pork Ribs.
Catch you on the flip side.
Oh, bother.